Hello bookworms, it's Jade from Bedtime Bookworm and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to talk to you about my anticipated releases for this spring. I consider my spring to be March, April, and May. So these are books that are coming out in those 3 months that I am interested in and intrigued by. So when I say anticipated releases, that doesn't mean I'm going to be reading these books anytime soon, and that's because I try not to read too many new releases. In fact, one of my goals for this year is for only 25% of my reading to be new releases. But that doesn't mean that I'm not excited about new books that are coming out. Ever since I joined the book community, I am constantly hearing about new books and adding them to my possible TBR on Goodreads. And to be completely honest, making this list every season, while it's exciting, it also is kind of depressing because I just know that I'm not going to be able to read all of the books that I want in my lifetime. Just new books are always coming out and I'm constantly trying to catch up on backlist books. So it's kind of depressing. Another reason why I do these videos is that even though I'm not going to be able to read all of these new releases, maybe if I tell you guys about these new releases and some of you read them, you can tell me which ones you liked and which ones you would recommend that I read. I'm going to be watching these books very closely to see how well they're reviewed, and that's going to determine if/when I get around to actually reading them. I had quite a list when I started to make this. I actually have a shelf on Goodreads called my Not Yet Released shelf. Throughout the year, as I hear about books that are coming out, I add them to that list, and then before I film this video, I sit down, go through that list and do a little more research to scope out any books that are coming out that I might be interested in. When I did that, I had like 30 or 32 books actually, and that is way too many for me to talk about in one video. So I had to cull that list. It was very hard, but I got my list down to 15. I feel like that's a reasonable number to talk about in this video. But if you're interested in seeing what other books didn't make it into this video, I'll link the Goodreads shelf in the description box. When I was planning this video, I did a poll on Twitter and on Instagram asking everybody if they would prefer to see these anticipated releases in order of release date or genre or maybe even age category, because I have a variety of books in different genres and they're about 50-50 between adult and YA, but surprisingly, most people just wanted to see them in release order. So that's what I'm gonna do. All right, that's enough talking, let's jump into it. So I'm going to start with my March books. I have 6 books coming out in March that I want to talk about. The first one is Daisy and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is coming out on March 5th by Ballantine Books. This is an adult historical fiction. I think it takes place in the 70s and it's about a girl named Daisy and her band, Daisy and the Six. And the synopsis says something about Daisy and the Six breaking up as a band and no one really knowing why. I gotta say, this isn't a book that I would typically pick up, but it's on my list because of the author, Taylor Jenkins Reid. If that name sounds familiar, that's because last year, or maybe the year before, she came out with the book, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. That book made it to practically everybody's best of 2018 list. I have yet to read it, but it is on my TBR and I do own a copy of it. But that book was such a hit that I can't help but be excited about the next book that Taylor Jenkins Reid is coming out with. The next book on my list is Before She Knew Him by Peter Swanson. This is also coming out on March 5th from the publisher William Morrow. This is an adult mystery thriller. I've read one book by Peter Swanson. It was last year called All the Beautiful Lies, and while it wasn't one of my favorite books of the year, I gave it 4 stars and I really had a fun time reading it. It was just like a fun thriller, and that's what I expect from this as well. He has 2 other books out that I've heard a lot about, which are The Kind Worth Killing and Her Every Fear. I haven't read either of those, but those were really popular, and I enjoyed the book of his that I read last year. So that's why this book is on my list. It sounds like this one is about a woman who thinks her next door neighbor might be a serial killer. The next book on my list is The Woman's War by Jenna Glass. This is also coming out on March 5th from Del Rey Books. This one is an adult high fantasy, and it's supposed to be really feminist. It's set in a world where there is a spell that allows women to control their own fertility. I thought the synopsis sounded really interesting, and my friend Roya from Unicorn Hunter Books recently finished this, and she loved it. She thinks it might be one of her favorite books of the year, so I'm really excited about it. It is the first book in a series, so I'm not sure how soon I'm going to get to it since I'm trying not to start too many series this year, but I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye on this one because it sounds really promising. Next, I have The Quiet at the End of the World by Lauren James. This is coming out on March 7th from Walker Books. So this is a YA science fiction, and it seems dystopian, or I guess maybe post-apocalyptic as well, because it's set in a world where there's global infertility. The main reason this is on my list is because of the author. Lauren James also wrote The Loneliest Girl in the Universe, which was also a science fiction book, but I heard it was like a science fiction thriller, which sounds fascinating, about a girl who was stuck in space on a spaceship by herself and was exchanging messages with somebody like thousands of years away or something. I don't know. I thought that one sounded fantastic, and it's really high on my TBR, so I was excited to see that the same author was coming out with another book, and the premise of this one definitely intrigues me. Next, I have When the Sky Fell on Splendor by Emily Henry. This is coming out on March 12th from Razorbell. This is another YA science fiction. It takes place in a small town where 5 years before there was some sort of explosion that affected almost every family in this town. And now in the present time, something like crashes out of the sky. It's not really clear what it is, like an asteroid or a spaceship or something fell out of the sky, and the characters in this book go to investigate what it is, and everything changes from there. I think the premise sounds interesting, but I've also just heard good things about Emily Henry in general. I've been interested in reading some of her other books. Specifically, I'm really interested in reading A Million Junes, but she's also the author of The Love That Split the World, which I've honestly heard mixed things about, but I was interested in at some point. And I'm interested to see what people say about her new one. The last book that's coming out in March that I am excited about is Peace and Turmoil by Elliot Brooks. This is coming out on March 18th, and it is a self-published book. If you guys don't know, Elliot Brooks is a fellow booktuber here, and she's one of my friends. I will, of course, link her channel down below. But honestly, most of you guys probably know her because her channel is quite a bit bigger than mine. And this is one that's actually going to get read because I am currently reading it. This is an adult high fantasy, and it's the first book in what I believe is going to be a trilogy. I don't want to say too much about it yet because I'm still less than halfway through it, but it's an expansive world with magical creatures and lots of characters and political intrigue. Elliot has been working on this book for so long, and I am very excited that it's coming out into the world soon. Alright, finally moving on to April. I again have 6 books that I want to talk about. First, I have Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan. This is coming out on April 2nd by Wednesday Books. I was actually contacted by the publisher to see if I was interested in doing a review for this book, which I had already heard some buzz about it, so I said yes. I was provided a free e-ARC, or advanced reader copy of this, and I will have a review going up next month. It is the start of a new series, but I was already interested in it from the bit of buzz that I heard and the premise that I just couldn't resist. This is supposed to be gothic and dark, and it's about a girl and a prince who have to work together to assassinate a king. And there's also a forbidden romance, which I love the forbidden romance trope. Next, I have Descendant of the Crane by Joan He. This is also coming out on April 2nd by Albert Whitman Company. This is an Asian-inspired fantasy, and I know those are really popular right now, but I actually haven't read very many of them, even though I keep putting them on my TBRs and anticipated releases. I'm excited about them, but I just haven't gotten around to reading very many. But this one intrigues me, and the cover is absolutely stunning, so I really hope this one gets good reviews and it stays on my TBR. Next, I have The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling. This is coming out on April 2nd by Harper Voyager. I honestly hadn't heard of this book at all, but when I was prepping for this video, I asked on Twitter and on Instagram for other people's anticipated releases so I could check them out to see if I wanted to add them to my list, and Riley Marie, whose channel I love, actually recommended this one, and it sounds fantastic. This is an adult science fiction horror book, which to me sounds like a glorious combination. And the first sentence of the book description was all I needed to hear. It says, "A thrilling atmospheric debut with the intensive drive of The Martian and Gravity," which I loved those movies, "and the creeping dread of annihilation, another movie that I loved, in which a caver on a foreign planet finds herself in a terrifying psychological and emotional journey for survival. That sounds fascinating and terrifying at the same time. Next, I have The Inspection by Josh Malerman. This is coming out on April 23rd by Del Rey. I'm a little bit hesitant about this one because I loved Bird Box, but I hated Unbury Carol. So I will be very interested in the reviews of this one. It is shelved as horror, so I hope it actually is horror, unlike Unbury Carol was. What's interesting is it looks like all of the characters in this book only have a single initial as their first names, which already intrigues me. It sounds like there's a school that is deep in a forest and isolated from the rest of the world. Actually, it sounds like there's two schools, or at least two schools, one with only girls and one with only boys. So the synopsis definitely has me intrigued, but I am a little anxious to see what the reviews look like. Next, I have Little Darlings by Melanie Golding. This is coming out on April 30th from Crooked Lane Books. This is an adult mystery thriller, and from the synopsis, it sounds like there might be some fantastical elements. The synopsis says it's perfect for fans of Neil Gaiman and the Grimm fairy tales. And while I haven't actually read Neil Gaiman, I want to, but I do love Grimm fairy tales and any sort of dark and twisted fairy tale retellings. That's right up my alley. This is about a woman who, when she was in the hospital having her twins, she thought she saw a woman try to take her babies, but she was able to stop her. But then a month later, she's at a park and the twins disappear, and when they're found again, she swears that they are different. That sounds fascinating and terrifying. Next, I have The Invited by Jennifer McMahon. This is coming out on April 30th from Doubleday. This is another adult horror / mystery thriller, and I believe this is a haunted house story. This is on my list because the author also wrote The Winter People, which was really popular. Again, I haven't read it, but I want to read it, and I love me a good haunted house story, so I'm excited to see what people think of this one. Alright, moving on to May. I actually only have 3 books that I'm going to talk about in May. So first on my list, I have Middle Game by Seanan McGuire. This is coming out on May 7th from Tor.com. This is actually an adult fantasy. Seanan McGuire is also the author of the Wayward Children series, which again I haven't read, but it's on my TBR. But that is a YA series, so this is an adult fantasy. And I honestly don't know much about it, but the author herself was enough to put it on my list. I also want to read some of the books that this author writes under a different pen name, Mira Grant, because that's the name she uses to write her horror books. Next, I have We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faisal. This is coming out on May 14th from Farrar, Straus, and Garreau, which is not a publisher that I'm familiar with. This is a YA high fantasy, and I'm mostly interested in it because of the author. It is a debut book, and it is also going to be the first in a fantasy series, but the author is someone who has been a part of the book community for a long time. She has a book blog, Icy Books, but she also has a design shop called Icy Designs. Like I said, she's been around for a while, so I knew of her before she even got a book deal. So I'm very excited for her to be publishing something, and all I really know about this is that it's a diverse high fantasy. I don't plan to pick it up anytime soon just because it is the first book in a series, but I will definitely be keeping an eye on the reviews and see what people think about it. Alright guys, those are all 15 of the new releases that I wanted to talk to you about today. Like I said, there are so many more that are coming out that I am excited and interested about that I couldn't talk about in this video, but I will link my not yet released Goodreads shelf down below so that you guys can check out more of the books coming out soon if you're interested. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like bookish content. I post 1 to 2 times a week. That is all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bookworms, keep reading. Bye. And I enjoyed the one so I'm not sure when I'm going to read it. Blech. So I've been interested in multiple if I needed to add to see so I could check them out to see if I next I have Little Darlings by Bye.